Chapter: Wells' Departure. The gaslight flickered softly as the time machine settled into the dim glow of 221 B. Baker Street. Holmes, Watson, and Wells stepped onto the familiar wooden floor, the scent of tobacco and old books grounding them back in reality. Watson exhaled deeply. "It feels strange, Holmes, as though we never left, and yet everything is different." Holmes nodded, adjusting his coat. "Indeed, Watson, the mind does not quickly forget such a journey." Wells, standing near the time machine, ran a hand over its brass plating. "And yet, my journey is not over," he said. "I must return to Weena's time." Watson turned, brow furrowed. "You're going back?" "Yes," Wells replied solemnly. "There is much to learn, much to understand. Weena and her people deserve more than fleeting glimpses into their fate." Holmes considered this for a moment before speaking. "You carry great responsibility, Mr. Wells. You alone possess the ability to witness the past and future, and to shape your understanding of both." Wells gave a faint smile. "A burden, perhaps, but one I accept willingly." He moved toward the time machine, making his final adjustments. The hum of its mechanisms filled the air, the room flickering with arcs of light. Holmes and Watson stepped back, watching in silence as Wells turned to them one last time. "You've seen more than most men will in a lifetime," Wells said. "Let what you've learned shape your own time." Watson extended his hand, and Wells shook it firmly. "Good luck, Mr. Wells." Holmes gave the slightest tip of his hat. "Farewell." With a final pull of the lever, the time machine roared to life. The swirling portal expanded, consuming Wells as the machine vanished into time once more. Silence returned to Baker Street. Chapter: Reflections in Baker Street. The fire crackled in the hearth as Watson settled into his chair, rubbing his temples. Holmes, standing near the window, gazed out at the fog rolling through London's streets. "It hardly seems real," Watson murmured. "To have seen the future, to have walked among those distant generations." Holmes exhaled sharply. "Reality, Watson, is not confined to the present moment. What we witnessed, what we learned, it shapes how we perceive our own world." Watson leaned forward. "The Eloi, the Morlocks, the ruins of civilization. It was tragic, Holmes, and yet in Weena there was hope." Holmes turned, his gaze sharp. "Hope, indeed. But tell me, Watson, do you believe humanity will heed the warnings of time? Or are we destined to repeat the mistakes we glimpsed?" Watson hesitated. "I don't know, but I do know that what we saw has changed me forever." Holmes nodded, then moved to his desk, retrieving his pipe. "One thing is certain. Time is both ruthless and revealing. We saw its shadows, Watson. It is up to us to ensure we do not walk blindly into them." The chapter closes as Holmes and Watson continue their discussion, reflecting on the weight of their discoveries. Chapter: Shadows of Time. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting flickering shadows against the walls of 221 B. Baker Street. Watson sat in his armchair, his posture weary but contemplative, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of his glass of brandy. Across from him, Holmes stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the fog-draped streets of London. "Tell me, Watson," Holmes began, his voice measured and thoughtful, "if you were to recount our journey in full detail, what would you say changed you the most?" Watson considered the question, his brow furrowing. "It wasn't just the sights, Holmes. It was the feeling, the weight of time itself pressing upon us. The Eloi, so delicate and carefree, contrasted by the Morlocks lurking in the shadows. It was a glimpse of what humanity might become, and the path that led us there." Holmes nodded, his sharp gaze fixed beyond the glass pane. "We witnessed civilization stripped to its bones, Watson. The ruins spoke louder than any book or lecture. Progress without wisdom, science without conscience, those were the sins that led to that future." Watson took a sip of his drink, letting the warmth steady him. "And yet, Weena stood apart. She was proof that kindness and hope could endure, even when the world crumbled around her." Holmes turned, his piercing eyes meeting Watson's. "A rarity, perhaps. A testament that even amidst decline, fragments of virtue persist." There was silence for a moment, save for the faint crackling of embers. Then Watson set his glass down with a soft clink. "Holmes, do you think we should do something with the knowledge we've gained? Should we warn others? Try to change the course of things?" Holmes exhaled slowly, tapping his pipe against his palm. "A warning unheeded is no better than silence, Watson. Time moves forward, indifferent to those who fail to listen. But—" He paused, lighting the pipe, letting the scent of tobacco curl into the air. "Perhaps it is not our task to issue grand proclamations. Perhaps instead, we must be mindful in our own sphere, understand the consequences of small choices, the ripples that form great waves." Watson leaned forward, hands clasped. "So you believe that the fate of humanity isn't decided in grand moments, but in the quiet, ordinary decisions that build over time?" Holmes smiled faintly, the ember of his pipe glowing in the dim light. "Precisely. A man does not wake one day to find the world in ruin. It is the accumulation of choices, the blindness to consequences, the surrender to ease at the cost of substance." The weight of his words settled between them, thick like the London fog outside. Watson sighed, rubbing his temple. "Then, Holmes, let us be vigilant. Let us hold firm to reason and conscience, so that if time should ever challenge us again, we will be prepared." Holmes lifted his glass in a quiet toast. "To reason and conscience, Watson, and to the ever-turning wheel of time." Watson clinked his glass against Holmes's, the echo carrying between them like the distant toll of a bell. As the fire burned low, their conversation carried on into the night, the shadows of time lingering long after their journey had ended. Preview: The Paradox of Time. Holmes and Watson had barely settled back into their routine when unsettling reports began to surface. Strange sightings in the darkest alleys of London, figures unlike anything the city had known. Pale, hunched creatures with gleaming eyes, moving through the fog like shadows untethered from time itself. It wasn't until Holmes received an urgent note from an informant that the true gravity of the situation revealed itself. Two men, if one could call them men, have emerged in London, claiming knowledge beyond reason. Their speech is fragmented, but the name Wells has escaped their lips more than once. Holmes lowered the note, his sharp mind racing. "Watson, we may yet be entangled in time's grasp once more." Meanwhile, in Weena's time, Wells stepped from the time machine, expecting familiarity, only to find the machine had vanished. The metallic scrape of retreating figures echoed through the windswept ruins, and he knew Morlocks had taken the vessel. But where could they have gone? What neither Wells nor Holmes yet realized was the impossible truth. The Morlocks had traveled not forward, but back. And now, they had arrived in London 2 weeks before Holmes and Watson's own return. As Holmes pieced together the clues, the weight of the paradox began to settle. Time had fractured, bending in ways that defied logic. The past, present, and future were colliding, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Holmes and Watson thought they had left the mysteries of time behind, but the past has other plans. 2 Morlocks have stolen Wells' time machine and arrived in London before Holmes and Watson. As the detective duo begins unraveling the paradox, they soon realize that the consequences of this temporal disruption could alter history itself. Can they restore the balance before time collapses in on itself? Find out next Sunday as the mystery deepens.